back of the head of Donald Trump, he is there. So right now, the Republican presidential nominee is hovering about 1% in the polling in terms of as he appeals to the African-American voters. Let's talk more about the dynamics here. Our Jeremy Diamond is outside where the protesters are, and then inside I've got Jason Johnson with me and Ron Brownstein also with me. So can we go to Jeremy first and find out, okay, we don't have Jeremy right now. So let's begin with my panelists here, Jason Johnson and Ron Brownstein. So, you know, you heard from the bishop there who says this is really kind of an exploratory mission for he and his church. They want some answers from Donald Trump in terms of issues that relate to African Americans. We know that there was a sit-down, one-on-one interview that was planned between the bishop. We still don't know whether that happened or not. Right. We were told before this day that there would be a one-on-one taped interview between the bishop and Mr. Trump, and that interview might air later, maybe even a week from now, and then there would be this service. We still don't know if Donald Trump is actually going to be speaking. All we know is that here we are, we have arrived. So you know, Jason and Ron, you were both talking about relationships, a long-standing relationship or lack thereof, and one of the biggest observations and complaints from many people in the black community have been, where has Donald Trump been before now? So, Jason, Donald Trump's campaign says this is their best effort right now.
Right.
2 months away from election, it has to mean something. What else do you have to lose, he says.
Well, yeah, that's the problem. I mean, people still can give him a list of things that they think they're going to lose. They think they'll lose access to health care. They think they'll lose access to any investigations of police behavior. They think they'll lose access to jobs. And Donald Trump hasn't really convinced anyone that his policies are beneficial to the African-American community. And here's the other thing. You know, I'm not going to cast aspersions on this bishop. I don't know him, right? I haven't been to his church. But let's be honest about how these things can get set up. This is a lot of attention. We're talking about a church that none of us have ever heard of before now. They're getting a lot of international attention. So, of course, someone is going to let Donald Trump come speak to them because it strokes the ego and it gives you a lot of attention. But it doesn't mean that the people who are in that room right now believe in Donald Trump. It just means they like the idea they're going to get on TV.
And so, Ron, is this more harmful to a Donald Trump if he doesn't speak, or is it helpful? I mean, how do you balance this? Is it helpful, at least that he's there?
Yeah, look, it's extraordinary that this is extraordinary, right? I mean, the idea that it is worthy of national notice that a presidential candidate for one of the major parties is speaking to an audience that comprises, you know, roughly 1 in 8 voters, you know, is just a reflection of how insular the campaign has been to this point. I mean, Donald Trump is the end of a process of a debate in the Republican Party. As we all remember, in 2012, after Mitt Romney won a higher share of white voters than Ronald Reagan did in 1980 and still lost by 5 million votes, there was a big debate inside the Republican Party. There was the famous autopsy by the Republican National Committee that said, look, we have to find ways to talk to this growing, diverse America. And then there was a counterattack from conservative intellectuals and analysts who said, no, the real problem is that we're not turning out enough culturally conservative whites. That led to the backlash against immigration reform after the Senate passed it in 2013. Donald Trump is, I think, the end of that conveyor belt, a campaign that, whatever icing on the cake a visit like this may represent, is fundamentally about mobilizing the most culturally conservative whites, what I've called the coalition of restoration, the blue-collar, non-urban white voters who are the most uneasy about demographic change. And the price of that is that he is facing historic negatives among the competing coalition of transformation, the parts of the Democratic coalition, millennials, minorities, socially liberal, college-educated whites that are the most comfortable with the diversity that we're seeing. So whatever happens here today, Donald Trump is looking at, I think, historic deficits among non-white communities and the need to thus produce really almost unprecedented margins among white voters to prevail. And I think that will be the debate after this election, win or lose, in the Republican Party. Is that a viable strategy after we see the results in November?
And this is Bishop Wayne Jackson right here. Perhaps we should listen in, because it will be interesting to hear whether he says anything about Donald Trump's presence there, or if it's just such a given that it doesn't need reminding. All right, so still more music right now, and singing, of course, when there is some reference to Donald Trump. Hopefully we'll be on time with it. All right, so Ron says, and underscores there have been historic deficits. But then, Jason, you also hear from, say, Alicia Bell, county commissioner earlier, who says this is insulting. Mm-hmm. It is insulting that this close to Election Day, and this is the effort that Donald Trump is making, and this is representative of an outreach to the African-American community.
I don't think it's an issue of insulting. It's just incompetent. I mean, this is not a very well-run campaign on a lot of different levels. I mean, if you look at this week, Hillary Clinton, the notes about Hillary Clinton's email interviews have been exposed. An email was leaked showing that the Democratic Party is basically stiff-arming Black Lives Matter. These are things that should be knocking Hillary Clinton 2 or 3 percentage points down amongst the African-American community, and Donald Trump can't capitalize on it because he keeps saying racist and incompetent things. That's, I think, the larger issue here. So he can say whatever he wants. He's going to be at this church. And like I said, would CNN ever be at this man's church? No. This is why this black community is doing it. They want the attention. But it's not going to change anything in the dynamics of this race. And that's what I think is the saddest part about it, that this community is allowing themselves, I think, on some level to be used by Donald Trump to sort of placate Republicans who think that he's just running a racist campaign, when in fact they're not really going to get anything out of him that should change how this race functions.
Jeremy Diamond is there outside of the Great Faith Ministries church. So, Jeremy, a number of people have gathered. We've heard them say dump Trump. What else are you witnessing there outside the church?
Well, the things that we've heard from protesters here is that they're upset at the way that Donald Trump's visit to Detroit is happening. They're upset at the fact that Donald Trump was given questions in advance for this interview, that he was able to prepare a scripted response, his campaign and the RNC at least. And some of them are also upset at the words that Donald Trump has used during his campaign. He's been dismissive of the Black Lives Matter movement, and the terms in which he's made his appeal to African Americans lately have been in ways that some people think are hyperbolic and not reflective of the reality that many African Americans face in this country. Donald Trump has said, "What do you have to lose?" And the response here that we got from a number of the community leaders who I spoke with was, well, we have a lot to lose, actually. We have, our voting rights, our freedoms that we've gained over the civil rights struggle over decades in the past. So, of course, African Americans here are saying we do have a lot to lose, and that Donald Trump's words in terms of saying you have no jobs, you have no schools, are not necessarily reflective of the reality of most African Americans. And certainly, while there are problems in Detroit, I spoke with the Pastor Mo Jackson, who talked to me about the struggles that he deals with his community there in inner city Detroit, the killings that happen there. When I talked to him about Donald Trump's solution, which is to bring more police into the community, he said that that's all wrong, saying essentially that, more police is not the problem necessarily, that it's about education and it's about jobs. Also a message that Donald Trump has talked about, but he hasn't said specifically how he can bring those jobs to minority communities and to impoverished communities in cities like Detroit.
All right, Jeremy Diamond, we'll check back with you. Ron Brownstein will be back with us, Jason Johnson, as well, as we continue to watch inside the church there, inside Great Faith Ministries International.